Welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live, broadcasting from the City of Demons. That's right, you heard me, La La Land, folks. And of course, we are broadcasting on 107.7 FM New Orleans, which is UPRN, as well as all sorts of outlets, including Deprogrammed Radio in the UK with their terrestrial radio in London and Leeds, not to mention the EU, across the US, Hong Kong, and wherever else they're picking up this show through iHeartMedia, who owns iHeartRadio now. Pretty much owns everything for that, mate. Anyhow, we have 2 hours, 2 guests, but this time instead of splitting them up, we got them at the same time. They are some of the coolest people. One I've had on my show years ago. The other one I think would be really critical if I didn't have both of them on. That's why I thought it was very crucial. And one of the topics, or one of the big topics we're going to be talking about tonight, is phantom messages. You know how people get phone calls or texts from someone that has passed away? Or some people even call them time travel messages or things like that. We'll be covering lots of cool stuff. So first, in one corner, we have returning to the show, William Hall, who I'll just call Bill. William, welcome back.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Now we got to introduce your other cohort, which is Jimmy Petanito, also known as the one and only Mr. Haunted. Mr. Haunted, welcome to the show for the first time.
Thank you.
Right on. Well, let's take it away, guys. What the hell is a phantom message?
That's a good question. Bill, what's a phantom message?
Well, a phantom message would be an unexpected, impossible or seemingly impossible communication of any means. Whether the popular one is phone calls from the dead, kind of what started the fascination, but we see it across the paranormal. So it could be a letter, maybe appearing from the future. It could be a voicemail. It could be that you hear an event while it happens. It could be the living haunting the living. All these kinds of unexpected, bizarre messages. Even computers, even sneakers. One of Jimmy's cases.
Or even cable boxes, Bill.
Oh, that's what I meant. Cable box. Well, the sneakers too, I guess you could say.
Well, let me add one more category in there. What about the Men in Black? That too is an unexpected message.
Yes, I was just mentioning mediums, but you're mode of communication. But you're absolutely right. That goes the gamut. So we cover not just the people or I'm bored, hello, that kind of thing, or I'm giving you a warning. But we cover the unknown entities, and the hearing events happen. What I call Jimmy and I categorize it as time slips because it just appears that way, and just really bizarre kinds of communications that could be hearing the event while it happens. And sometimes it's the living haunting the living, a case of and haunt is, I'm not using that word properly there. It's just a way to phrase that, but I was going to call you, but I know I didn't. And, later the afternoon you call me back and say you got my message, and it was everything that I was going to call you about, but I never got the chance. And I know for a fact, and you've got, a lot of people that have that reoccurring, or that experience you hear again and again.
I actually have a personal experience. This is just very recent phenomenon. Yvonne Smith, right? The hypnotherapist for ETs, abductions.
Yes, I've heard. Yes.
I used to be the what do you call it? I guess I don't know if you want to call it media relations, or I would essentially lead the Zero groups when they had functions, with speakers there, kind of be the guy who lets them speak in essence, and the host, right, the MC. Well, I was just thinking about Yvonne, and I swear I was on a plane and I get a call from her, and so I just text her back. I'm like, I'm going out of town. I'll call you when I get back. I call her back, and she's like, I didn't call you. I'm like, I swear to God, I got your voicemail. And then just the other night is another member of Zero. It seemingly called me during this broadcast, and I was like, okay, I told her I'm on air. I'll call you back. When I called her back, she's like, I didn't call you. I'm like, what the hell's going on here?
Oh, well, now, in the first instance, she left a message,
She
right?
did, yeah. She doesn't remember doing it at all, and I had to send it to her.
Right. Wow.
To this day,
And
they said it also is happening to Preston Dennett, that they've been getting calls from him and vice versa, and no one's called from, any of us. Like, the four of us haven't called each other, let alone, the cross paths of 3 different people. 4 different people, if you include Preston.
Well, you did that whole section better than we could have.
It's weird.
No,
it's just weird. It doesn't make sense. It's not just once,
Yeah, and they're all alive, and that's why we say, and that's why I often wonder, are they really? I mean, I don't think they are in every case, and I don't know if they are in any case. I mean, who knows? But are ghost spirits of the dead, or are they from the future, past, or a different parallel universe, and very much living as they seem, and often idiotic and mischievous and whatever. I'm not talking about unknown entities, but just in the case where you can recognize, the person. But yeah, we see phantom messages, like you said, in the extraterrestrial realm too, and it runs the gamut. And then there's ones within hauntings and outside of hauntings.
Now, what's some of the craziest ones you've heard or read or seen? The most bizarre.
Jimmy, do you want to do the...
I'll go into the haunted cable box story if you want.
Yeah.
Sure, I will.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
All right. I call this one the haunted cable box because, well, I'll tell you why. This was about 1996. Me and another investigator got called to check out this house in Meriden, Connecticut. And the family's main complaint that the cable box was talking to them. I hate when that happens myself. So we went there. About a month prior. The husband, wife, and they have a 14-year-old son. We'll call Dave Jr. They were all watching Seinfeld, and it was like it was a Wednesday or Thursday night. And the family was having trouble sleeping since they had a 20-year-old nephew who lived in Florida that committed suicide a few days earlier.
Ooh.
So about 10 minutes into the Seinfeld episode, the television started to change channels on its own, seemingly, and this continued for quite a while. And the wife said, "Hey, maybe it was her nephew's spirit trying to communicate." At that point, the TV stopped.
So it responded to her mentioning his name.
Right. So then they kept flipping stations, and they couldn't make sense of it. The next evening, they were watching TV about the same time, and the cable box was repeating the same pattern. It was just going. They figured that something was wrong with the cable. So, but the father asked the husband. He said, "If you're a spirit trying to communicate, go to channel 24." And the TV, and remember the old cable boxes, the cable box switched to channel 24. And then it started racing from channel 72, which was the highest it went back then, to 72 to 0 over and over again. So they got a bit scared.
Yeah.
So they put a Bible next to the TV, and they started to pray, even though they were asking for this to happen. The Bible got thrown to the floor immediately.
Ooh. They didn't want something to do with the Bible.
So they went to bed hoping it was just the problem again. I think it was the third night, the same time, about 11 p.m. Channels began racing from 72 to 0, and their son, the 14-year-old kid, had an idea. He said, "Let's say that channel 1 is A, and channel 26 is Z," and the box immediately switched to channels 25, 5, then 19, which using that code spelled yes.
It's kind of like Ouija board in some way,
Exactly. So they got a pen. Yeah, they got a pen and a paper, and for the next couple hours, they would ask questions to the TV and then write down all the channels it went to and then decipher it later. So they had this whole conversation that, they'd go back and fill in the letters. So this is the story they got. A man claiming to be named Joseph Frank Dana was murdered in their apartment that they were living in about 10 years earlier. And the cable box, they started calling him Joe. They said after his murder, they gave all his details. After his murder, he was rolled up in a carpet and carried out of the apartment and buried under a porch down the street. It gave the address. And they almost to the point where they're going to try to dig under somebody's porch. And they even added that his murderer has never been caught. And Joe even provided them with his social security number. So this is another weird thing about this. They would call them Joe parties, because the cable box would address you if you came into the room. For example, the father was 44 years old. So when he walked into the room, it flashed to 44. And when you leave the room, it does 44 3 times. And they would have parties where neighbors and friends came over, and they'd have them walk into the room. It would greet them,
by their age.
By their age, right?
Wow.
So after a while, they said, maybe we should, call the police, because, maybe this is a missing person, that unsolved crime, whatever. So they asked Joe how they could help, and Joe said he would like a proper Christian burial. So Dave did call the police department, the father, and provided him all this information, and they sent an officer out. While taking the report, it got weird, because the cable box, and you could say this is just random letters popping up on there. It gave the police officer's social security number, his home phone number. This is before Google, back in '96 or something.
Stuff to really be able to track him, right? Yeah, it's pretty specific.
Yeah, and it gave all this information, and the officer actually included all this in his report, which even back then I was smart enough to take a picture of the police report that they had. So the officer filled out a report, and then the next day he came back with his sergeant. The sergeant was a total non-believer and said, "This is ridiculous." The sergeant still provided this guy's home phone number, his children's names, but he accused the 14-year-old son of having an extra remote and doing like a trick or something. Like, why would we be tricking you with this? So they did go back and investigate their claims, and during the investigation, they discovered no one named Joe Dana ever lived in that house, or no one by that name was ever missing, and the social security number that he provided never existed.
So it's just a lie.
So now that thing's lying, and what do they got? They got a big mess on their hands.
Just messing with them. Hey, let's.
I was just gonna say, how many times have you heard from a Ouija board for people using it that they're in contact with this one entity, and all of a sudden it says, "No, my name is really this. I'm not who you're thinking about that it is. Like your sister or your relative. I'm Zozo or whatever it be."
Yeah. It's Aunt Clara. No, it's Zozo.
Yeah, right. I've heard that more often than not. Yeah. Isn't that the demon that haunts Ouija, by the way, Zozo?
I don't know, but when I was a kid, it's weird, because that's a kind of a new phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And when I was a little kid, I remember me and my sister would be playing it, and I don't know if it's just for some reason it went to those letters over and over again, and I just thought it was playing Oz, Oz, Oz. Like, I didn't understand why it was doing that, and I think it's kind of
recently
weird.
I got someone to try Ouija with me, because nobody out here wants to. I got 2 boards, and it didn't get Zozo, it got Zoza, and I was like, that's weird, but
it's the female version.
Yeah, I guess, right? It must be his wife.
We're in trouble tonight. We're gonna be in trouble.
I know, right? We're gonna be doors slamming after this and breathing down our necks. And all that
they
stuff.
sell. Hey, have you ever seen the knockoffs of the Ouija boards? They sell them for like, $4 or something, and it's spelled, WE and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I guess they only contact like entities that spell wrong and stuff.
Oh, I do have a little more to the story if you want the cable box story.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so we went to investigate this house, and we stayed over a few nights trying to capture any kind of evidence we had, and there was stuff like You ever see in a gray room that's like dimly lit, you can see black shadows darker than
Yeah,
the dark kind of
that
thing?
scares me more than
So
like seeing an alien.
so we saw those kind of things. We're trying to like record them, but it just wouldn't come out. And there was one point where the 14-year-old boy came. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know where he was. It was a small apartment, but he came running in and pulled up his shirt, and it had a big red, like a big red burn on his stomach, a perfect circle. And what happened? And he said this little, he called it a muscle-bound small creature, like a little muscle dude. He said, it was like 3 feet tall. Looked at him and charged him and put his head and it like ran right through his stomach. And he claims that's what, we weren't there to see it, but that's what he claims. So we interviewed these people about 3 times because usually when you're investigating a haunting, you're trying to figure out when it started and did you get a new item in the house? Do you have a new job? Do you have a new friend? Like usually there's some kind of starting point. Like
trigger. Yeah. Trigger.
So this started in March or whatever, and after about the 3rd interview, the father's like, "You better tell the people what happened." So the 14-year-old son told us his cousin that lived in Florida. They went to visit him, and they said they were riding skateboards around the neighborhood with their friends and stuff. And he said, "Hey, I got something cool we're gonna do something cool." So he says, "Come along with us." And they said they went to this little clearing in the woods, and there was a big pentagram in the clearing in the woods, and they brought out a goat. And they said they were all in a circle chanting. They had some robes or something, doing all these chants and stuff, and they kind of sliced the head off the goat.
I was gonna say, it sounds like a sacrifice that I was being set up for.
And he
and
they said
that could be a goat. Yeah.
He said this yellow beam of light went from like the ground all the way into the air. He goes, I don't know if the kid said he didn't participate in the ritual, but he's 14 years old. Who knows? But we think that maybe that has something to do with it. We don't know. And the other thing is, like I said, we were in the middle of investigating this house, and the I forgot about this part, Bill. We went there repeatedly, and the last time, is anybody gonna, the church won't even come out and bless the house because they don't believe us. So I said, we have our own little thing we could do to your house. We'll do a blessing. So the day we were going there, the father said the cable box kind of stopped working. He said the day we were going there, it was flashing 66 repeatedly, and said, "Watch out," or "Look out tonight." It's spelled out. So we're setting up, to do our house blessing thing, and the father is very religious. He had the Bible on cassette, and it was like one of those big clamshell cases with 50 cassettes in it, all the Bibles.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay. He goes, "Do you mind if I play this, while you're doing it?" I said, "It's your house. You can do whatever you want." He goes, "Which one do you want to hear?" I said, I said, "I'm not an expert or anything. Just put whatever you want in." And he goes, "Which one do you?" I said, "Just this one." I just pointed to one random tape. So he starts playing it in the it was back in the day, that little rack system with the cassette tape, and he put it in there, and it starts playing the Bible backwards.
Wow! Holy crap!
So every single other one he had worked perfectly because we checked them. Just the one that I pointed to.
The one that you chose.
And I'm looking at it right now. I still have it on my wall, and I brought it to a sound engineer that I know. That he works for AC/DC, Bruce Springsteen, Def Leppard, and he took it. I don't know if he took it. I don't know what he does. He's a sound engineer, but he checked it out for me. He goes, "There's nothing wrong with this tape. Get it out of my house. Go home." So he was freaked out by that. And so, anyways, the end of the story was after we.
I know what he did. He checked to make sure there wasn't a twist in the tape that was.
He did some stuff.
That's probably what he did.
So then, the day after, I went to call in the morning to check in, how's everything going, and there was no answer. The next day, no answer, and then a few days later, I drove all the way to their house to say, what's going on, and they were gone, moved out. Never found out what happened. Can't find them.
Now, I'm going to hit you both with two questions that I've been asking of pretty much everybody who's involved in ghost hunting in the last 9 months that I've been coming back on this show. First question, but this is to both of you. Have you ever come in contact with a ghost that was speaking in a dead language? Like Aramaic, Ancient Greek, something like that. Sumerian, even.
I'm working on a case right now that the woman is speaking Aramaic and writing in Syriac,
Wow.
Aramaic, and Hebrew.
That's
She claims
thousands of years old right there.
She claims she doesn't know the language, and she also I have a letter from the bishop. This is in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
That she had a previous exorcism, and during her exorcism, he wrote. I have a letter. They witnessed her speaking and answering in Aramaic and Indian.
American Indian.
No, Indian.
Oh, Indian, Hindu.
Yeah.
Whatever they're. Yeah.
Yep. And I actually have gotten a lot of messages from her that I can't decipher yet. I'm trying to still get help on those. But and also she said that she had knowledge of the people there that she shouldn't have had.
Ooh.
So yes.
Now here's the second question. I get more no's on this one, but there have been a couple yeses. Have you ever come across a ghost of an extraterrestrial? Because they've died here in crashes, in captivity.
Well, how do we?
No.
how do we know that some of the extraterrestrials we're seeing aren't ghosts?
That's exactly my point. Yeah, because there seems to be a huge similarity that, like, when one thing happens to you, it opens the door to the other. High strangeness is called by abductees or contactees.
Well, I mean, if the multiverse is true, then all kinds of entities would be coming through, including, well, not necessarily duplicates of ourselves. People would be quite disappointed if there was another one of me. No, but also, future, past, unlimited possibilities from unlimited universes. I mean, who knows?
That Mandela effect freaks me out too.
Oh, hey, can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, that's basically what the multiverse is. Yeah.
Well, I understand that you could not remember things clearly when you were a kid, like the Berenstain Bears and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And like the one that bothers me a lot is cup noodles. I remember that was cup of noodles.
The way I remember it.
It was never cup of noodles.
What
you
was
look
it?
up all the cup noodles. Is that the
cup
stupidest name?
Noodles ever? Without a no?
Yeah.
Everybody looked that up. It's called cup
Holy
noodles.
Shit.
Yeah.
But if anybody remembers the movie, back when I was a kid, before you were born, the HBO used to show the same movie all day long. Remember, Bill? Do you remember? They play with the Wanderers, whatever, every 2 hours, the same movie. So on summer vacation, I watched Moonraker, all day long because it was a movie on TV. So you watch it all day. And there was a scene in Moonraker. It was a 007 James Bond movie where Jaws, the guy that has the metal teeth. This girl in the forest helped him get under. He was trapped underneath a log or something, and she helped him up. And everybody was mean to this guy, and she smiled, and she had braces, and it had a connection because he smiled. There was that was the reason for the whole scene, and they even had the sun. Yeah. The sun glinted off her braces. There was a whole thing, and now you look back, and she doesn't have braces, and like everyone seems to remember. Like, why would we just make that up that she had braces? I don't understand it. Freaks me out.
I've never seen Star Wars, so I can't speak about that one. But the Bernstein Bears, I've actually seen a video. It could be a hoax, of course. It could be CGI. Someone tried to recreate it, but he couldn't. What this guy does is he finds some frequencies, and apparently his room is more haunted than not. And he plays these frequencies off this Bluetooth speaker, and then, first pops up like a black mass. I think it's supposed to symbolize a black hole. And then he's able to fine-tune it a bit after some more tries, and it seems to be a dimension. And one of them, he walks through the dimension. But one of his videos is he has the book and the original printing of the Bernstein Bears, and as he goes in and out of the room, back and forth, you see the book changing. Like, I swear to God, it's insane. Now, again, it could be CGI, especially with the username Funky Fathead, but this guy made a few videos, then disappeared. I can't find him. I mean, the videos are still on YouTube. There's like 7 or 8 total, but he's never posted anything since 6 months ago or a year ago, something like that. He's just gone. So I'm wondering what if he made another dimension and walked through and got stuck, right? But the Bernstein Bears really freaked me out on that one. And obviously I remember the reason it's called the Mandela effect is because people remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison. Now, I don't remember that. I remember when he died recently, when he, even that movie Invictus, where Matt Damon plays is in it, and Morgan Freeman plays Nelson Mandela, and they have a scene where Matt Damon goes and sees the prison that he was at for 27 years, and then, so it's like, okay, I know that story pretty well, so I don't even remember an inkling of him dying in the 80s.
No.
But some people do.
And the people that there'll be people that argue with me, like saying I remember it this way, so you're wrong. It's like, no, because you have a different reality than we had. Like, we all have different realities.
Well, our memories are very, very faulty, and part of that is by design. So, like, I never knew this until until I talked to some people smarter than me. But and also, reading more about it. But with memory, I always thought, hey, I remember this scene and this whole day and stuff. But the way the mind works is it remembers some main things and then it backfills them. And I know when it's like if you get together with people that you all had the same experience with maybe 20 years ago, it probably would take all 4 or 5 or 6 of you to get the story right. Because, no, it wasn't John, it was Jack. Oh, yes. Oh, wait, yeah, it was Jack, And because our memories just we only hold so much, and then we fill the rest in, and we think we have it right, and we kind of don't.
Well, to some people, it's like if you like Brady Bunch is something you watched 1 billion times. If somebody all of a sudden told you it's Grady Bunch, you're like, no, I know it's Brady Bunch. I swear it's Brady Bunch. Like, no, and then you look it up and it says Grady Bunch. Like that's the stuff that freaks me out.
I actually heard that the reason why some people are undergoing this Mandela effect is because they're testing time travel. That's what I've heard. Michael Sala is a big proponent of that. Mm-hmm. When I was in Hawaii, we did an interview about that.
Yeah, I don't think we have that cracked yet. We know how to go forward a little bit, but going back is still a problem for us.
Bill, tell them about the that brings us to the Dodson. Your specialty.
Well, Dodson was that's the most that's probably the award-winning Phantom message for the most, over 300 Phantom messages in that case. Dodson happened back in the 80s, and what I am finding, because it's very hard to make any progress in the paranormal, but when you revisit something and now are able to verify some things that they couldn't then, that's when it really becomes fascinating. So Dodson is in England. This is in 1984 this happened. Ken Webster and Deb Oakes. And they were a young couple and moved into a little cottage and decided to do some renovations. And they were having a friend stay with them too. That was, I think it was Thanksgiving break. And they were tearing up the flooring, and it was, revealing the original brick underneath and stuff. And Ken worked at he was a teacher at the high school. And so he was able to borrow a computer. And of course, these were the old computers. They didn't have internet or anything like that. Didn't have email. None of that was available. And you were able to type things and make files and stuff. And so they start to have some poltergeist kind of activity. Furniture piled up, cans of cat food piled up, things like that. And Ken notices this weird message on the computer, just a file that wasn't there before, and he brings it up, and he starts reading it, and it kind of sends a chill through him. And it says, basically it says, Ken, Deb, these are the nightmares of something. It was like a poem, but it was in old, like really old English. And it really puzzled him because he didn't know what it was from. And it says, well, I'll read you kind of, or I'll say the English translation, because otherwise, it's I write on behalf of Monte Watt. This is, we're talking very, 400-year-old language.
Like Shakespeare, right?
Yeah.
The way he wrote it, yeah. You got to be in a different plane to understand that.
Yeah, even worse. I mean, this is even worse than Shakespeare. But basically it says, I'm trying to think of the very first thing. Yeah, the very first thing he says is a poem, and I think Ken, because of what it said, it was, you could use their names. It was evident that it was like a message, and he was very puzzled, and he typed back, and so now there's this communication that starts between them. And what was weird is the responses were very fast, and in this weird language that he can hardly understand. So he prints it all out and brings it to his to the English professor at the school and says, "Hey, could you make any sense of this?" And he's like, "Oh, but this looks really old." So he's trying to look it up to see, and he looked it up and he was able to decipher it. And he said, "This is really bizarre." And Ken explained that this, these answers came back very quickly. So if you were faking it or something, how would you even be able to put it together? The answers are very, just like you were, even faster than you can type, and it ends up that this person eventually reveals that he's Thomas Hardin, and he was the person, he originally lived in that cottage about 400 years ago. And so they're getting to know each other, and actually the first question that's asked is, Thomas types, what is that material? And it was the plastic cover of a notebook. So what was fascinating about the case, too, were things like that. If you were writing for Hollywood, you probably wouldn't have picked the plastic on the notebook. Maybe you would have, I don't know. But anyhow, they, Ken and Deb told their story, some of which, they regret telling. Some of the truth sounded a bit crazy, and they would have rather left out. And then, of course, after that, they stopped talking because, it's just, you believe it or not. But it was investigated quite heavily. It's a very, very long case, and Jimmy and I revisited it now that we're able to verify things about the house and who lived there, and what, and look at what was said that they couldn't easily find, because then you had to literally go in the library and search for it, and eventually they got tired of that. But so Dodson had over 300 messages, including on the floor, like in chalk. There was footprints in the paint when they originally painted, like going up the wall. All sorts of phenomena, but the main focus of the phenomena would be the communication between Thomas and Ken, and then later on introduces, there's this other character that's clearly not Thomas, and this thing says basically that this is an experiment, and Thomas described that he had a light box. The light box is what he called it, a computer. He had a light box too, but it didn't appear that he typed. That appeared to be something either vocal or telepathic, because his girlfriend was singing, and that came out typed into the computer, and she did not type. So, and then there was crossover. There was again an element of The Living Haunted the Living, with Deb going to sleep, having a dream, and now meets Thomas in the cottage, but now in his time. So it's a really, really bizarre case. And it's so bizarre that I think if Ken and Deb were expert writers, you wouldn't believe them. But anything they've said about it was said to the level of it's like it could only have happened. And Jimmy and I were lucky enough to get in touch with Gary Rowe, and he investigated the Dodson. So we revisited the entire case and were able to come up with some things. Like what there was a prediction made. What happened with the prediction? Well, ends up came true. So it's a really fascinating phantom message case.
And
go ahead, Jimmy.
No, I was going to say it's even better than that we're communicating with the past and possibly the future. But this was before the internet, so these files were appearing on their computer.
Jeez.
There was no internet.
Right? Yeah, so it's not like they could have just been downloaded or hacked or something. That's really implausible.
Now, the technology was there if you had a van parked outside with, incredible equipment and stuff. That was possible, but that wasn't anywhere around there. And actually, Gary went in and replaced the computer with his own, and even put it in a shield. He made sure nobody got near it, and the messages still came on his own computer.
There's two things I want to mention in the chat real quick. The first one is I want to give a shout out to UFO Disclosure TV for the super chat donation, and thank you for the comment, UFO Disclosure TV. I wanted to give them a shout out. And also, I do have a question here for both of you. This comes from Nicholas Cashmore. Why would a spirit visit us?
Jimmy, do you want to, or do you want me to? Or?
Well, I could give a couple. I just think there might be a few reasons, maybe just to visit loved ones, or they might have a message for someone. They might have unfinished business. They're trying to figure out stuff.
Well, there was one. This sounds really bad. I should remember all my guests by first and last name, but it was, I believe, I could look it up right now. Grant something, the guy from UFO Hunters. I've had guys from both shows. The only one I haven't really had on yet was Zach Baggins, but one of them said Grant. It's the first name, whatever the hell his last name is. I'll figure it out soon. He said that one of the cases he had worked on, and I don't even know if this was profiled in Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures, whichever one was his, but he said that they were in communication with the ghost who led them to a tree, who led them to a diary that talks about this guy was like a gangster, like mafioso type that really kept us away from his wife, and he had a mistress. And essentially, after finding this diary, the ghost essentially solved its own death. A 60-year-old.
I did hear that story.
Yeah, I thought that was crazy, and that's just right there exactly what you're talking about. What's one of the reasons? I'll figure out his name while we're chatting here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there is an element of both circumstance and condition.
Grant Wilson was the one. That's the guy.
Oh. And I think sometimes it may not even be on purpose. I mean, in case of a poltergeist, we can say, maybe the condition is a magnet for the entity, which certainly appears to be the case. But I like to remain open because, again, these are our interpretations of something that is really, well, I'll give you a quick example. A phantom message of calls from the future, predict 9/11 is what we titled it. But before 9/11, about a month before, David Fritz, this happened in Cape Cod in Massachusetts. It was about a month before, and he gets this voicemail, and the phone rings, goes right to voicemail, and so he looks for callback number. He can't find one. He listens to the message, and he hears metal crashing, people screaming, and he gets this like instant feeling of dread from head to toe. Like, not like this is, if I pick up the phone, if I hear screaming and stuff or whatever, I assume it's a movie or somebody's arguing or whatever. I'm not going to have this kind of reaction that he describes. And we find that with a lot of the phantom messages, that it's kind of like the minute you hear it, there's something different.
Well, I'm still blown away by what you were saying, the case in England, how before the internet, files were literally placed on the computer.
Oh, it's crazy. And it gets much, much, much weirder. To tell the whole story would take hours. It's crazy, yeah. But it's a very, very, it's bizarre. Oh, and just I'll finish the 9/11, then I can comment on another Godlinson thing I forgot to say. But so this call goes to voicemail, and so David's puzzled by it, deletes it, and then next day he's getting another call, and he keeps getting these voicemails. So he lets his girlfriends and people listen to it. He doesn't tell them, what it is. He says, "So I got this message. It's weird. Take a listen. Let me know what you think," kind of thing, And I think one of the ladies who listened to it even ran out of the room. She couldn't even listen to it. But they all were like, "What the?" It was like they were hearing an event happen, not like this was TV or just a clip that came across a voicemail or something. So these calls keep going. He gets sick of them, and David goes, and not only does he get a new phone, he gets a new phone carrier. And the calls stop for a little bit, and then they start again to the new phone. He gets the message. And then they stopped again, and the morning of 9/11, about an hour before the towers went down, he got one last voice message, and then no more calls after that. And so one of the most common questions we get asked is why? Why would somebody leave a warning message if there's nothing you can do about it? And my answer is, I don't really think it's a warning message. I think it is an event that somehow got carried by energy through whatever and sent that. Now, the fact that it was a horrifying event, did that have to do with it? Maybe, because as we see, like what Jimmy said, there's usually some sort of trigger, and and of course the more horrifying events, certainly we see that happen. But there may not be any motive behind a lot of them. Some of them might be just curiosity, the ability to go between universes or whatever. If you have the ability, then hey, could be a little kid alien popping in. Hey, everybody,
How about this Mothman guy, Bill? He isn't helping anybody. He appears, and then some tragedy happens.
Oh yeah, right. At the Pleasant Valley Bridge or something? What's it called?
Yeah.
30-some dead.
Well, the bridge thing, I don't think had anything to do with it, and neither does John Keel, but enough happened there that was just bizarre, including really bizarre phantom messages, where John Keel was going to a hotel at a last minute. He stops at some dive hotel and goes in there, and he says, "Hi, blah, blah." They sign up. He goes, "Oh, you're John Keel. There's a bunch of messages here for you." And he's like, "What?" Like nobody knew he was going there. And he looks at the messages, and they're just like all it's just all BS. Like you can't, like, what the hell? But it's like something letting them know, we know you're there, we're following you, we know you're there or whatever. But it was just bizarre. And phone calls with that metallic kind of, buzzing, which is, a common kind of theme or sounds that people report when there's phantom messages with, in the extraterrestrial realm, or in the case of those weird phone surveys by these kind of cold, they don't quite talk right English, and, will either use a survey or say, why are you investigating UFOs, that kind of thing. So yeah, it runs the gamut. Yeah.
This actually sounds sort of in line as those 4 messages that I was given by Justin Bamforth, which were from '93, that MIB called, and it's just weird. You could say it's a little creepy when it's talking about this doppelganger that this MIB apparently sees of this person it's calling, because it's asking the weirdest shit. The first call says, when are you going to be back from Houston? Not back in Houston, back from Houston. And it just repeats itself over and over again. And at some point they establish that they're speaking to an interstellar being, and then it starts to warn them. It says the government something, warn you about the government, and then it talks about investigation, and then it talks about Orion, and then it's just weird. I'll send it to you both after the show, so you guys can add it to your messages, because you definitely, I think, would love to add them in, especially when you hear the backstory of what happened to this gentleman, how he did have he saw something in the sky, a UFO, I think twice even, and then he got visited by a Men in Black, and then these phone calls started, but it's just bizarre. Now, let me ask you this. I know Jimmy can answer this, and I'm sure you could too, Bill. Have you both been around the Warrens?
Yes.
Jimmy, me, I saw them, but I was, I didn't work with them.
But both of you saw Annabelle.
I've been working with them since 1991.
Yeah, that's what I was reading. That's what I was asking, and I assume Bill's also seen Annabelle.
Yeah.
That freaks me out, because I've always loved inanimate objects that all of a sudden move. Not battery operated, just a Raggedy Ann doll, and it's just cutting people up and just killing people. Like, holy shit. I'd be scared to have that near my house. As a matter of fact, one of our listeners, Lasha Senyak, said that in her college years they had a doll that was haunted, and they were so scared that her and her roommate, she locked it in the refrigerator. And one of the joke was from someone else that was writing to her. She was, I bet you lost a lot of weight that semester, since you probably didn't go to the refrigerator very often. She's like, oh, yes. Me and my roommate both. I'm like, can you find that doll? She's like, oh, no, that was, years ago. I don't know what we did with it. We got rid of it. I'm like, hey, but part of me wants to see one. But, damn, I don't want any of that luck to follow me around.
Yeah, if that was me, I'd open the refrigerator and the doll's eating a chicken wing or something, and I don't want to see that.
Yeah, I know, right? You open it up and it's just eating your food and drinking your milk and whatever it be. I'm like, what the hell? Holy crap? Where's it going?
If it eats too much of Jimmy's food, I'd put my money on Jimmy. Jimmy's gonna win.
Yeah.
Now,
I'm gonna mess up that doll.
What else was crazy other than Annabelle in their library? Or is it their library or their museum?
Oh, what's cool? I mean, I don't know what the stories behind a lot of the stuff, but they actually have parts from, what was it, Flight 401?
Flight 401.
Was that the one that I think it crashed in? I think it crashed. No. I could be mistaken with the number, but it was there's a famous story about, I think it was a plane that crashed in the Everglades, and back in the 70s maybe. And they used what?
401 sounds right.
Right, and they used parts of the crashed plane in other airplanes, and people and pilots would complain that they saw spirits of pilots just sitting in an empty plane, and it all came from parts that they used from this crashed plane. So they have actual parts. A student gave them from Florida. They recovered some of the parts.
They just integrated them into other planes.
Yeah. So I think they stopped doing that because they had so many complaints, and they actually did a movie about that story. They have this big giant 7 or 8 foot. It's so evil looking. I don't know. It was they found it in the woods, and obviously was part of some ritual or something. They have another doll that it's made of human, has human hair, the human tooth is in the doll. It's called a
Ooh,
shadow doll,
weird. Human
and
tooth?
I guess yeah, and I guess the theory was that that the oh man, I can't remember the story about it, but it's something that you put some kind of you put a curse on someone with this doll, and it's something you don't want to see. I don't know.
You ever heard of Robert the Doll?
Yes,
Yeah, I only read
Robert's
about
creepy.
that recently, and as apparently Child's Play was modeled after Robert the Doll, who was set to haunt or going back and forth from a window in 1908, and it's in right now in come on, why am I blanking out? The islands off of South Beach, Florida, the Everglades,
Oh,
not the Everglades. You know what I'm talking about? The islands.
yeah.
I thought some guy had the doll. No,
Yeah, no, it's in a museum
I thought he
down
was
there.
selling it or something.
Key West, Florida.
Key West, thank you. Key West, that's what I was trying to remember. I know it's a great skydive spot, but that's pretty much all I've known about it. Or um, thought of going there for any other reason other than to jump over there.
I know at one time, I don't know if they still do, Jimmy, but I know at one time they had one of the broken crosses from Lindley Street. Um,
Yeah.
it's not haunted, but I mean, it's a really cool,
No,
artifact.
why do you
It's a
think
cool thing
ghosts
to have.
consistently break crosses, light them on fire, and Bibles on fire, knock them down? You ever heard of this Demons in Seattle case? Keith
No.
Keith
Well, yeah,
Ledger.
I mean, to answer the question, I think there's a lot of misperception about that.
About the Bible and the cross.
But if you have a different book there, it's going to knock that over too. I mean, in Lindley Street, the common thought was, wow, it seems to go after religious items. There was a number of witnesses that said that, but if you looked at the actual data of the incidents, religious items were only impacted from events 10% of the time. However, they had a larger emotional impact. So witnesses would say, "Wow, it was just creepier."
Well, if you're
To
a believer,
people.
it's scarier that a cross
Right,
flipping around than a TV moving.
right, or
I
a chair falling over. You know what I mean? Even though that's freaky enough, but yeah, it has more emotional impact. So,
that
um, uh,
If you are a religious person, that's when it would be the most freaky. Because you look to God to solve
right,
the
right,
issue
right.
of the haunting, and all of a sudden your, holy items are being destroyed and burned and thrown at you.
that case I was telling you about in Europe, there's a video of the woman. She was trying to record phenomena in her house because at the time there was bangings on her wall. So she has the camera going, and there's a crucifix that's about a foot and a half tall that was on her dresser. That all of a sudden it's on the ceiling, upside down. It's just suspended from the ceiling, and then you can see it spinning down to the ground and falling at an angle.
That's
Uh,
weird.
it's not normal.
The reason why I brought up the Demons in Seattle case is this guy had two major paranormal groups come and stay with him for a long period of time. And if you look at the report, the paranormal report, which really goes into detail and shows a lot of evidence, they caught a lot. I mean, like whether it be shadow figures, things being burnt, like Bibles, apparitions, you name it. And it's one of the most documented cases on the West Coast. And the guy has moved out, but the ghost is still bothering him. Whether he goes to hotels or wherever, even across the country, it's still there with him. Mischievous little guy.
Little oh man.
Yeah, there
Right.
are rare poltergeist cases too, but they're normally short-lived. But there are a few that are like that where they just follow the person everywhere. That would kind of stink.
Yeah, and now that sounds like why the hell would it continually do that? And yet it does. Years later too, like 7 years, I think, something like that. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely. If I have the file, I'd like to get
I
it to you. But he's got a YouTube channel where he's uploaded everything. And obviously he's not a professional photographer, so he just put everything up there, and that's why I like to look at the paranormal report because they really did a better job in dissecting it, showing where all the items that are on the floor were up before they just got miraculously thrown about, or if they would leave a room and everything was in place, and they'd come back and it looked like just a party with 30 people just trash drunk and
right.
rock stars breaking stuff, and then it's like this just happened in seconds and no noises.
Yep. We had a case.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay. Oh no, I was going to say, speaking of weird emotional weird things, in Lindley Street. To me, one of the freakiest things is when they, around Christmas time, when they came back home from shopping or wherever they were, and Jerry would go in and check the house, and he goes over to the tree, and all the ornaments are off the tree, and they're all in a neat little pile. I mean, that's, and then the tree, of course, got knocked over a series of times, but that was one that I think frightened the family the most. Or I don't want to say the most, but that was one of the freakiest things, because it would have been one thing if you say, oh, how come all the bulbs are off the tree and all around, but off the tree in like a nice little organized pile. Yeah, that gets to it's almost like a personal invasion. Well, invasion. Yeah.
What's it with the poltergeist by doing you reminded me of a case because you said the Christmas tree. This one was just a husband and wife just moved into this house, and the guy was a carpenter, a builder, and the first thing he did, I said, I changed the locks on the doors and had an alarm system on the house, and only him and his wife had a key. Around Christmas time was the first incident they had, and they were watching TV, and all of a sudden they see a elderly man and a woman in front of their Christmas tree, like the backs towards them facing the tree, and he said they could even see the man's plaid shirt he had on, but you could see through them, and it looks like they were just admiring the tree, and then it disappeared after a while. So that was the first incident they had. The woman went shopping. I think it was like at 3:30 in the afternoon, and he would get home at 4. I think he got home at 4:10 that day, and by the time she left and he came home, everything in their house was rearranged. Their couch was where the love seat was, that back and forth. They woke up one morning and had 3 slashes on each one of their chairs in the kitchen.
Well, and there goes my question. I was going to say, did they decorate it better? But I guess not.
No. And also it was weird because you said the ornaments were piled up. Just weird little incidents would happen. That they had a small closet with a washer and dryer in it, and it had one of those. The light had a pull string on it in the closet. And they said that one day, she went in there to just do the laundry, and every clothespin, which was about 20 or 30 of them, that was in her bag, was all it was on the pull string to the light. All of the clothespins were attached to that string. I have a picture of it, and it's just creepy looking. Like, why do that? What's your purpose?
Yeah, no, seriously, right? Let me shift gears here, because someone in the chat was mentioning this a while ago, and I just mentioned my admiration for Bob Lazar. I know you know about this, Jimmy, and Bill, do you know anything about Bob Lazar?
Yes.
Let's talk about it for a quick second, in light of the fact that Jeremy Corbell made another documentary, but more recently, as we talked for a second, at least, Jimmy, you watched the Joe Rogan Experience, right, with Bob Lazar, right?
I did listen to it, yeah.
Okay, and what about you, Bill? You did too. Now, here's my thing is, I've always believed that guy, right? And I remember Stanton Friedman was the biggest proponent against him, saying, well, he couldn't find his school records, even though that George Knapp found the Los Alamos the phone book from 1982, as well as the newspaper where Bob Lazar was featured on the front and it says physicist here at Los Alamos. But my argument to Stanton was, and may he rest in peace, was that Stanton, he's a good friend of mine, was a good friend of mine, and in the afterlife will be too. And he's probably one of the biggest mentors I've had, truthfully, too, for that matter. But point is, as I said, I myself had a shitty high school record. I just wasn't interested. I went to 5 high schools in 4 years, right? I got kicked out of a few. Then I went to junior college first, and I did okay, but not really good. But it wasn't until I went off to UCSB that I really did well, summa cum laude well, and then went off to go on to law school. Well, who's to say Bob Lazar just really didn't care about high school, because when Stan Friedman found his high school record, which wasn't the best, to get to Caltech, but then he found records of him at Pierce College. That's the easy way to get into any of the top schools, is go to a junior college. And so that's what I told Stan Friedman. I said it worked out well for me. Why couldn't it work for Bob Lazar? But even in light of that, there's been so many little instances that just are proving Bob correct.
Well, I'll share you my bizarre theory on Lazar. Stanton's problem was that when Bob mentioned professor, either at Caltech or MIT, Stanton did find the professor, and he did remember Bob Lazar, but he never taught at MIT or Caltech. He taught at, I forget the college. It may have been what you said, but Lazar was taking a night course there. At the same time, he was supposed to be going to MIT, and he couldn't remember when he graduated from MIT. And I don't know anybody who went to MIT, period. But I even know when I graduated, and I can't remember what I had to eat yesterday. But so I do know he did not go to Caltech or MIT. Now, don't get mad at me because I'm not done. I do think that he is sharing potentially a very real story. So, in other words, here's my theory. He has misused a few physics terms, and I'm no physicist, and other physicists have backed that up, but even I recognized it. So I know he's not a physicist. I also know he never went to Caltech or MIT. However, I do think this is my theory so far. I haven't read the book that's coming out. I will read his book when it comes out. But my theory is Bob Lazar probably was a lab tech. He was at Los Alamos. We know that. The phone book listed everybody. I mean, janitors, not necessarily employees either. So the government might not even be lying when they say Bob was not an employee. He may have been he may have worked for one of the subcontractors as a lab tech or something, because we know he didn't go to, but we know he was at Los Alamos. Here's what I think happened. He either found this stuff himself and then, made up the story because he thought nobody believed him unless he said he was, talented or smart. Who knows? He was young, or he, for some reason, lied about that. But he's relaying a story from someone who can't. But in other words, he may have gradually and quite mistakenly became basically the fall guy for the exposure. There may have been a guy inside that said, look, I can't say it, but, or maybe he didn't even say that. Maybe he just happened to learn about it and decided to talk about it. And as Bob said at the last minute, he really would prefer not to, and then it was released, etc. So, but that's what I think, because there are certain things we know for a fact. I mean, you can't go and take every MIT yearbook away from all the people from the years that he said he went there, and he's not in any of them. So, I mean, you can't just go collect that.
Do graduates really have yearbooks? I don't have a yearbook from law school, and it wasn't a thing either.
Well, I don't know. I'm saying yearbooks, but any records, you wouldn't be able to wipe them all out like that. Especially when he gave a wrong professor where he was taking a night class at the same time. So he was physically placed somewhere else. In other words,
but George Knack was able to talk to some people that dropped him off at Caltech, picked him up. They said if he wasn't going to the school, then he sure made an attempt to seem like he was going in for a couple years.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. There's something off there, though. But he did. In other words, I'm in the middle on him. I don't think he's lying completely at all. But I know for a fact certain things he said were not correct. Now, again, he was young.
Yeah, he
So
was 29 when this happened. Yeah. The weird thing is, though,
25,
30 years ago we had this. 1947, we know we have the Roswell craft, and then you can go even back to like 1896 Aurora, Texas, right, which they buried in a cemetery and then supposedly removed in the 60s or 70s, by first removing the grave marker and then removing the contents of the well. Anyhow.
Oh, did they ever remove the contents?
Yeah, from Aurora. Yeah, it's gone. No one can find it anymore. And also, we know about the Dropa Stone incident 12,000 years ago in China. Well, one thing that I first learned from the Joe Rogan experience was that one of the craft, at least one, was found in an archaeological dig. And now, so we know these things have been here for quite some time. If we had 9 of them, just at S4, not at other locations, and I've always argued that they're not in government hands. They have to be in private military contractors because they have better security. They don't have to answer to Congress. Freedom of information doesn't apply. Nothing really applies if they're in private hands. And so even a recent document, the Admiral Wilson memo, seems to allude to that. But the thing is this is 30 years ago, literally 30 years ago, and we are no closer to creating a reactor that create artificial gravity waves, and we are no closer to them telling us that they possess this technology or in fact possess artifacts from another civilization.
Yeah, or anything. Yeah,
anything, right? It's like, what's it gonna take for us to get there? Anything?
Yeah, we're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to see it first. That's it. We're gonna have to get there. Well, we did get there first.
Yeah, we got there. We just need it to become public. Is the thing.
Yeah. It's got to be in New York City. It's got to be a craft right in the middle where they can't hide it. Well, of course, then who knows? But it's like I forget who's. How could it not be leaked? Well, it's been leaked so many times and nobody believes it. So, or there's always something because nobody's perfect. So, I mean, if you go into say, oh yeah, but he did this in high school or, so it's very difficult. I think there's something to Bob, certainly. I think the schooling and whether he's a physicist is up in the air just from what I read. I'm no physicist. And just because I do know there's 2 terms that I thought he used wrong, and then I read and physicists agreed, and I know hardly anything except for what I read and what people tell me. I'm no physicist. But that being said, passing 4 lie detector tests, he's either severely mental ill or he's telling what really happened. And he doesn't seem to me to be severely mentally ill.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. I mean, he's still running his company.
I'm probably more mentally ill than he is. So I don't mean to offend him. I mean, I do, based on Stanton, and even Stanton. Actually, I read in a book Stanton. I think he gave a few paragraphs to Bob Lazar, and what he said was, what he was able to prove was not true. And at the end, he said, I can't verify the rest. He said it's unlikely, but there were other things that he covered that he said, no, definitely. So he wasn't counting it out. He was just saying, this is as far as I can go. And that's, of course, he was more of a document guy anyhow.
Yeah, he didn't want to get involved. He didn't want to talk about the briefing documents that he had just read about that couldn't verify.
Right, exactly. And although he was quite fond of Travis Walton because that was a unique case that did have, multiple witnesses and lie detector tests and the rest of it. And I think to Bob's, credit, he has 4 different lie detector tests on 4 different subjects, that he passed. And I know people say, yeah, but you can pass that. Yeah, but it's not exactly easy.
No, it's not really as easy at all.
Yeah.
You have to be able to get your control questions correct and then be able to answer the ones that you're trying to pass up as a lie the same way as you had the control questions, without your heartbeat going up, without you breathing any faster. All these
Yeah,
micro signals that we give off.
Yeah. Oh, you got to be a real serial killer sociopath.
Yeah, you have to believe. You have to literally believe what you're saying is the lie to get it off.
Yeah.
Delusional.
And it's very specific and detailed, and it goes on forever. And it's like, to me, if you were gonna, well, I mean, it's not like he made a ton of money on it. And Jimmy and I know about the amount of money there is in in this. There's a lot better ways to make money. So, you know, he certainly, he might make some money from the new book, but Jimmy and I know how that works. It's not like, he said, "Oh, I know, I'll lie and I'll make a ton of money." I think he was smart enough to know that was not really
well, he won't even accept
anyhow.
the money.
You know?
He won't even accept the money. He donates it.
But I mean, even if he would accept the money, I don't think there would be so much money that it would be worth worth that anyhow. You know, he wasn't an idiot. You know, so. But he fascinates me. Definitely fascinates me. And always did. I don't know, Jimmy.
Yes. You know, we just talked about this, so you know, I'm a Bob believer.
Yeah, I'm a hardcore Bob guy. I've been a believer since '89. I've been following that case like as close as you can. And I've tried hard to get him on the show. And when I was working with Art Bell and he wouldn't do Art Bell even, I knew it was going to be close to impossible.
Yeah. But, you know, bottom line, I would say that I would say he's telling the real story. You know, like I said, despite, you know, those other things. And he even said it on the recent interview. He kind of hinted at it, like, what does it matter? Would you believe me if I did go to Caltech and MIT? You know, he said something
all
to that effect.
All that does is prove his schools, you know?
Hey, guys.
Right. The point was he was 25, and if he lied, and he can't say he lied now anyhow, even if he did make that up, because you wouldn't believe the rest of it. And we all know the way real life is not as easy as fiction. It's, you know, it's messy, and it's not as linear, you know.
True. What were you going to say, Jimmy?
Oh, I was saying if nobody ever heard the Bob Lazar song, look it up on YouTube later.
Oh, no, I haven't. No. I've seen a lot of this stuff, but I haven't heard of the song.
It's one of my favorite songs ever.
Huh. Interesting.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, let me ask you, have you guys ever seen apparitions?
Aborigines?
No. Ghosts that you could literally see through.
Really?
Shadow and what ghosts that I could see.
Yeah, like a floating woman that you could sort of see through or something like that.
Yeah, not a really good one. I know Shane Soroya. I know he has a picture of one picture, and it's tough to see him. Like like the White Lady, right, Jimmy? It's, you know, that kind of.
You know, like I was telling you earlier, I saw 2 UFOs in my lifetime that were right over my head, like huge, not miles in the sky. And I always wanted to see a saucer, but the 2 I saw weren't saucers. Just like I want to see a ghost, a spirit of a person. I haven't, but I've seen a shadow person, I guess what you'd call it. And I saw something that looked like the Hat Man guy.
Oh, mention that.
Yeah.
Let me say about the first one. Was we were investigating a home that this is a great one. We got a call from Ed and Lorraine and said that, could you check out this house for us? The woman is outside on the stairs and she will not go back in the house until someone gets there. So we got to her place. It was a 3rd floor apartment, and she was crying on the steps, just like she said. She wouldn't go in the house. Anyways, we brought her upstairs to give her an interview, and she kept saying. She goes, don't you see that? And she's pointing at random areas in the living room there. And she's like, don't you see this? We're like, no. And she's like crying, like she's so frustrated that we can't see it. So we literally not believing her now, because it's like, I don't know if she's just seeing stuff or imagining stuff. So we're ready to pack up our stuff, and she says I just went into the bedroom. So we me and the other investigator, we followed her into the bedroom, and she goes, see it there, and like there was a shadow like outside of the wall, like
Weird.
standing there, like it's like a good foot outside of the wall, and there was definitely a male figure, like regular height, about 6 feet tall, and the thing is, like, we didn't believe her, so we didn't even bring the cameras with us or the video camera we had, so we're no farther than 8 feet away from the thing. So I was like, Rick, what do I do? Should I go get the camera and you wait here? But then again, I said, if I walk away, I might never see this again. So I kind of wanted to experience it. So we were even trying to play around with the door to see if it's a play of the shadows or something. We're trying to figure out what it is. So he goes, well, let's try to touch it. So he took like a step forward, and the thing turned to its right and took a step and kind of disappeared into the wall. And it was creepy. That's all.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever had anything like that. The closest thing was about 2 decades ago. I was using a Ouija board, and we were at a park, and we seemed to start communicating with the spirit that died at the park. Of course, they always lie. We went off to an apartment with a couple of friends, and we tried to communicate with the spirit, just to find out that the spirit was not who he said it was. And then all of a sudden the door slams and it won't open. And we tried to say goodbye, and the damn thing wouldn't let us say goodbye. And that's not the first time it wouldn't let me say goodbye either.
I got a weird story for you. I haven't shared this one yet, I don't think. I have when your Facebook memories comes up like 4 years ago today, whatever. I totally forgot about this. On a particular day, I said I just saw a small gray cat with, like, the kittens when they're young, like the hair kind of sticking out of the top of their ears, like the little tufts of hair.
little
buzz, yeah. So it was a young gray cat, and I walked by my hallway in my house, and he was there, like a solid gray little cat. And I looked at it. I was like 3 feet away from the thing. I looked at it, and it tilted its head and looked at me like, what are you doing here, to me? And I did the same thing to the cat. And then it just disappeared into like nothing, like particles, like it just dissipated. So I wrote it on Facebook. I said, I know this is like, why even write it? Who cares, right? But I wrote it because it was so strong. Like, I really saw the thing. So I said, I just saw this gray cat, just noting it. I don't know what it means. So everybody's writing, did you used to have a gray cat? No, I never had a gray cat like this. So about a year and a half later, my father-in-law lived in Massachusetts, and he came to live with us, and I didn't even know he brought 2 cats that were living outside. They're outdoor cats. I never saw them before in my life. Mm-hmm. So one day when we moved him in here for a while, and I was walking down the same hallway in the same spot. His gray cat was sitting there in that same spot and tilted his head at me, and that freaks me out. Like, what was that? Was that the future?
Oh my god, that's like a time slip.
Yeah, it was so weird. And I'm glad I like posted it when I did, because no one would ever believe me.
Let me ask you something. I've heard this interesting theory about time travel, that if you want to travel, say, to the past, you can't go further than the time machine was invented and started being used. Have you heard that theory?
Well, like you're.
No.
So
like
the moment we figure out time travel here, obviously, at S4 they seem to have figured it out, if they can get that reactor to produce gravitational waves, because gravity affects time and space. The point is the first time you turn it on is the furthest back you can go. So unless some ETs set up shop here a few 100 million years ago, then there's no way we can go back and visit, unless that's the machine data was still here, and we've been using it since.
I mean, that's a fun theory, but I don't think it was made by a physicist.
No, definitely not. I don't know who you.
Because I've read a lot about time travel, and we don't have enough down for the going back in time is what really has us. Going forward, we can't do well, we can't do by much, but that we can do a little bit. And when there might be a different way, but going back in time is still I'm not saying we won't crack it, but it's, who knows? It could be 300 years or it could be 10 years.
Hey, Bill Hall.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill Hall. What about the Dodson case? Wasn't the future person butting in the conversation from 2109? And this was in 1980.
Yeah. That was. Oh, yeah. That's what I wanted to say. Is that the light box? They asked Thomas, "Well, how did you get this light box?" And he said, that he was, sitting down, one evening, and the wall like opened up, and he said the devil himself stepped through. At least I thought it was the devil, but it was not the devil. And he describes this glowing kind of, creature, which, of course equates well to describing an extraterrestrial, who gives him this so-called, light box. And he gets in some trouble with, according to his messages with the light box. Then Thomas is arrested, and they think he's doing witchcraft. There's these whole messages back and forth. And Ken and Deb don't, they think, of course, some days, many days, they think they really were talking to Thomas Harden, and other days are like, who knows? Could be somebody pretending to be him, or and then they got this 2109 person that supposedly is from the future doing an experiment. One fascinating thing was they said, "Okay, prove you're from the future." That was, I think, might have been Gary, but yeah, there were tests. Prove you're from the future. So they typed back the coordinates of when the next supernova would be, which when Ken and Deb were talking about this, after it happened, when they were talking about this in England, it was said, but it didn't happen yet, so nobody knew if they were going to be correct. And the prediction was correct if it was exactly correct if you looked towards us from the outside. In other words, it was backwards if you looked from Earth, but the coordinates were right on if you looked from outside Earth.
Interesting.
Which is almost creepier, but it's fascinating. I mean, whether you get it backwards or forwards, but that's what they figured out. Well, if the viewpoint was different, if there's, where they're looking at is different, then they're right on where they predicted.
2100, you said, or 2109?
Well, 2109 is kind of that's the name it used. 2109.
Oh, okay.
It didn't reveal what it was, other than from the future doing an experiment of sorts. And I guess it's been messed up now that Thomas is talking to. The experiment wasn't supposed to be with Thomas talking to Ken and Deb, evidently, according to this. It's just that it's really the most bizarre thing that you can hear, but it was investigated very well by Gary. In fact, there's some parts of the story he says he's sworn to secrecy. He can't even say it, but he says, "Trust me." He says, because there was a time later on when 2109 said, I want to speak to Gary Rowe. He knows about these things, whatever. And so Ken was printing out messages without reading it, because that's what 2109 wanted, and he was handing them to Gary. And Gary was, blown away. Really, he said changed his life. He was completely blown away, and he said, because he thought it was all fake at first. He was really, really trying to prove. He thought the kids were playing with him, and old stupid guy into UFOs and hauntings, and you know what I mean. He really thought it, and then he was blown away by the messages themselves under test conditions. But then he was really blown away when the 2109 correspondence went to him. That's when he really he was just really changed, as he said. And he's not. He's one of the guys where his heart's in it. And, of course. But yeah, so we really have a lot of thanks to Gary for the first time really coming forward and sharing some additional insight on one of the most fascinating cases, a very extreme case of communication. And Thomas, from 400 years ago, Thomas was writing a book of the events, kind of like from his point of view. And they talked about it, and they said, Ken, you should write a book, and I'll write a book. And he was supposed to hide it, and I forget where he's supposed to, they never found the book. But the idea was he would write it and hide it, because, of course, if anybody found it, he'd be killed in those days anyhow. But he was going to write it and hide it, and hopefully, but, who knows
came out
where and what.
Hey, Bill Hall. Hey, Bill Hall.
Yes, Jimmy, let me know.
Is there any way to obtain a signed copy of this book that you're talking about this whole time?
I know, right?
Oh, golly gee, yes. You can go to halloftheparanormal.com.
Yeah.
And I'll personally sign it for you and put all sorts of surprises in it. And whatever's in Jimmy's left pocket, we usually throw in the envelope.
Nice.
Unless it's a used lollipop, then we
hopefully it's a Rolex.
Yeah.
I got a question in the chat for you both here. This is from Lasha Senyak. What is the most successful way to communicate with a ghost?
Yeah, I answered her in the chat and said it's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Ah, there you go. Bill?
Well,
$1 billion question.
I would say. No, I mean, the best way to experience is to go to like a flap area, area where there's just a lot of activity, because otherwise you spend hours and hours and hours, in my second book, Haunted House Diaries, it was a home in Litchfield County, and this place was, every time you went there, something happened, and something different happened. So it was like, I guess it's a funny way to say it, but it was an efficient way to really experience a bunch of things and try to make sense of things. Not that it helped that much, but as far as how to talk, I guess it would depend on what you're encountering. Some things won't talk, obviously. If it's an entity, you just talk like you talk normal. I think it depends what it is. If it's a poltergeist, you're not really going to talk to it. You're going to want to let it know that you're boss and break the pattern and move on. So it's one of not showing fear, but or trying not to. But I guess that's a convoluted answer. But I think the bottom line is it would depend on what exactly you're encountering.
Let me ask you this. I heard a lot of people talk about 3:30 a.m. as like the haunted period. I mean, when you hear you see a lot of on YouTube Ouija board videos that go wrong. They go to a cemetery. It has to be 3:30 a.m., which I thought was really ironic because Whitley Strieber said that every morning he wakes up at 3 to meditate with his dead wife at 3:30. And I'm like, holy crap, is there really something to this 3:30 a.m.?
I don't know if it goes.
Heard it was 3, but
3 or 3:30, somewhere in that range.
I don't know if it's. It seems to be a thing because just on this one example, I can't say it's a thing, but the woman we're working with that is videotaping a lot of the stuff for us of her goings on. At 3 a.m. every morning, her walls start pounding.
Jeez.
And we have video of her going on like 24 hours, especially while she's sleeping, and you can see stuff happening right at about 3 o'clock, and I don't know why.
Maybe that's the time the most active. That's weird.
Some people say it's darkest before the dawn thing, or I don't know.
Could be. Let me ask you about curses. What do you guys know about curses? Can you break free from them? I mean, do they really mean a lot, or is some voodoo lady just talking crap?
All the above.
Yeah, yeah, I would say, unless, I mean, there are cases, uh, I look at it this way, uh, and this kind of goes to the communication part. Um, I mean, a lot of times you can use a false way to communicate for real, if you know what I mean. So, in other words, you could use witchcraft, or you can use a prayer, or you can use a spell, or whatever. You can use those things that don't really work. They don't really work because of themselves, but because you're trying, if you're in the right place and whatever, you could form a real communication, and you could form a bond with the thing. And there are certain things that'll protect maybe land for you or something, but I wouldn't equate that to a curse. Other than that, I don't believe in them, and I've never seen any valid proof of them. But except in the case of a false method, which really works. If that makes sense. In other words, it works, but not because of why you think it works. You know what I mean? Kind of like a rabbit's foot. A rabbit's foot can give you a lot of self-confidence, and that self-confidence could do wonders for you. And you can think it's the rabbit's foot, but
But
really,
it's really your
that's
self-confidence.
not why. It's really your self-confidence, right? Same kind of parallel. I mean, that's my
I
take
did
on
a
it.
study when I was in undergrad. I was an econ major, but my minor was psychology and human behavior. And I did a study in specifically in human sexuality about those. What are the perfumes called? Come on, you guys can help me out. The pheromone
Mhm.
colognes. And I tested, and this was a single blind study because I didn't have an assistant to blind me, but the everybody who was sprayed with regular cologne had the same effect as those who had pheromone cologne, only because they thought the pheromones would help them. So really there was nothing there other than just the belief that, hey, it's going to help me more get laid, and boom, there I am, it's working.
Yeah,
So it doesn't work.
I haven't found one that worked.
Geez, I spent $300 on that stuff. It's going to be in the mail any day.
Well, hopefully it adds a lot of confidence for you.
Yeah, right.
Now,
Yeah, but I think, I mean, there is, of course, truth to pheromones. They
there
already
is
work.
there I mean, I've
It's
read
just
studies, but I'm saying that the experiment that I carried
yeah,
out
it's just
in UCSB didn't
it,
produce the results.
it doesn't work the way we want it to work. Is what really we're seeing.
Now, we got
We
a
haven't
little
met.
bit about 10 minutes left before I start asking you guys to plug in where people can find you and books and stuff like that. What do you guys want to talk about?
Well, let's see what the chat room says. What do they want? Well, we could.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see. Here's another time slip
Story.
story, and it's a case where um, I don't know. It's one of those ones that really sticks with you, kind of like the 9/11 really sticks with me. Um, this girl's with her boyfriend, and this happened actually. What was it?
Is that the Gettysburg one?
No, the one where it was in it was in 2002. That was the Cheryl Phillips, and
Oh,
we know her. But
right.
yeah, her boyfriend was in an apartment building that was known to be haunted. It used to be a hospital nursing home, and there was black shadow figures. So there were some other things going on. But the phantom message is the most bizarre. Um, besides, of course, seeing a few entities. But uh, she gets a phone call, and um, it's a disconnected phone that was in the pool room. That's what rang, and so he answers it, and actually she answered it, and she hears, guy on a respirator and everything. And for some reason, and this is what we find over and over with these cases, is she instinctively knows it's her boyfriend. And, of course, she gets that feeling of dread because she realizes she's listening to her boyfriend as he's dying.
Ooh,
and
shit.
Yeah, it's freaky. And so then there's another call. He ends up hearing it, and of course he's like, "What the?" And of course he knows it's him too. And about a month later, and he wasn't sick or anything, but about a month later, he did die of a sudden massive heart attack at age 51. And of course, they were all in shock. But
who wouldn't
they
be?
just heard the loud. They heard a loud sound of a respirator. And what was really freaky is the beating of the heart. They heard a loud beating of a heart. Even the roommate heard it, and and afterthought, maybe it's an elaborate joke, but it just, like, who would do it and why, and it just seemed very weird. And it was, again, the way they fell, and that was that's another time slip story. There's also they're very rare, but there's a few cases where people have had text messages which appeared to be from their future self, like themselves talking to them.
Text messages, huh?
Course, oh yeah, text messages, computers doing searching. I think it helped somebody find an ancestor.
Sonny Taylor.
Yeah, Sonny Taylor, right? Good old Sonny. And there's the famous story of Adolf with where guy appears on the TV and all German words, and also there's the turning on the TV, computers turning on. Basically any electronics, but even non-electronics, letters, as we said, writing
Jack
on the floor. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good one, Jimmy. You want to tell that one?
How many minutes you got?
Well, we don't have a lot of time.
Dr. J?
Got about 5 minutes before I want you guys to start plugging in your stuff.
I could do this one in a couple minutes. I have notes written down for me on this one because I don't know every detail. But this guy, Jack Fries, was only 32 when he suffered an unexpected fatal heart attack in June of 2011. His obituary described him as a man who could make you laugh on your worst day and will be missed by all. And he was known for a sense of humor, in other words. So everything was quiet for about 5 months, and then the emails started. And he died in June. In November, his best friend, Tim Hart, was confused when he saw a new email in his inbox, and the sender was his good friend, Jack. The subject of the email read, "I am watching," and the text underneath it wrote, "Did you hear me? I'm at your house. Clean your effing attic."
Shit.
So Tim remembered the last time Jack visited, they were just hanging out in his attic, and Jack was telling him what a mess it was. And he goes, there was no one else in the attic at that time, just them two. So Tim Hart wasn't the only one who received this type of email from Jack that November. Jack's cousin, fellow named Jimmy McGraw, you might know him, he also received a strange email in November. The sender, his friend Jack Fries, the subject heading was, "Hey Jim," and the message was, "How are you doing? I knew you were going to break your ankle. I tried to warn you. Got to be careful." And then he also wrote, "Tell Rock," who was another friend of theirs, "tell him hi for me. His email doesn't work."
Shit.
So he's claiming, yeah, right. So, and actually, if you look at the stories up on YouTube, they have the actual letters, I think, too, or the emails. And the McGraw, he had broken his ankle a week prior as he was headed out the door for work, and he said he only told a few people about the accident. And he goes, here's a few possibilities. Someone accessed Jack's email and sent these, but like, why would they do that? And another possibility is that you could set up your email to be mailed at a later time.
Yes.
So he could have done that, but how's he gonna, predict his friend breaking his ankle before he died?
I'm predicting he was going to die. I mean, why would he send him? Yeah, I'm watching you. It doesn't make sense.
Right. Or is it communication from the beyond the grave? That's my finale.
I'm gonna actually check that one out. Jack Freeze.
It's spelled F-R-O-E-S-E.
F-R-O-E-S-E. Got it. I got that one circled here. Now, I just want to say it's been, I knew this time would fly by. It's been fantastic to have you both on, and of course to have you, Bill, back on. And Jimmy, this was awesome. We got a lot more to talk about. I actually sent you in Skype, Jimmy, the files that I was talking about. So if you could send them over to Bill.
Thanks.
Now, real quick, if you guys have any final words for everybody, what would it be?
Be afraid of the
dark. Yeah, you can get some free things too at halloftheparanormal.com. And if you order a book, Jimmy and I will get together. We'll sign it special for you, include a lot of stuff, and then we'll spend $30 on coffee and treats. Right, Jimmy?
Yes.
Starbucks.
Yeah, and our book's available anywhere, but if you want it signed from us, personalized, just go to halloftheparanormal.com and we'll get that.
Well said. Now, first, let me tell everybody that this Sunday I have a surprise stream with the NSA whistleblower, Bill Binney. That's right, folks. He was long before Snowden. You might have caught my last interview with him, which was actually a pre-record. This time I'm trying to figure out how to live stream it with video, by the way, on a Skype call because he is far. The last time I interviewed him, he was in Amsterdam, so this time I got him in a more prime slot, which would be 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And then, of course, join us Monday, same time as today, for whatever I decide to book for you guys. And, of course, remember, folks, the only thing you need to remember is the name of the show. That is Dr. J Radio Live. DRJ Radio Live is the username. Of course, those of you in YouTube already know it, especially thanks to all my mods and all the people who are asking questions. And I want to thank UFO Disclosure TV again for your super chat and your amazing comment. Really appreciate it. It's people like you that keep this machine running and are giving me sort of feedback. So, like, hey, should I be continuing to do this? Well, apparently you guys want so I guess I will. And let me say this. I really want to get some feedback for you folks because of all this YouTube demonetization stuff. Dark Waters told me that he no longer puts his whole content out. What do you think if I did the live stream, the whole show, afterwards put it unlisted, released at 25% of it or even less, with a link for you guys to hear it off my website in the subscriptions? If you guys are open for that, then that's something I gotta try before they go after me, which is just inevitable. I've had all my friends demonetized, from Third Phase of Moon, Secure Team 10, Jimmy Church, and I would not be surprised if I somehow end up next. And remember, at DRJ Radio Live, folks, is everything from Patreon, YouTube, as I mentioned, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, Tumblr, but really the one I really pay attention to the most is Twitter. If you're going to use the Gmail one, there's a good chance that I won't see it. I rarely check my emails. I hate it. I really want to turn back the clock on that. But Twitter's kind of easier for me. So if you tag me in something, I guarantee you I will see it and I will retweet it and I'll like it and all the fun stuff. Now, with that being said, folks, this is Dr. J, and I am officially signing off.